Hello, my name is Scott Marshall, and this is a video that I'm making to talk about some of the original art that I'm selling. I divided it up into four groups, A through D, which are price groups. I've already talked about groups A and B on different videos, and this group, excuse me, this video is going to be about groups C and D. So I'm going to start with talking about group C, which is basically anything from these groups are going to be multi-page stories that I didn't want to separate the pages if I could help it. Of course, if somebody wants to buy them and separate them after the fact, that's up to them. But I figured buyers might like the option of having all the pages in a story, especially a short story. Most of my stories are only, between 2 and 4 pages anyway. So Group C, everything in Group C costs $150 per set of artwork. And this first one is a mini comic that I did in the late 90s called Stolen Car. It's an adaptation of a song by the great Canadian group Rheostatics. And so it's basically my interpretation of the story of the song. In my case, it's about a carjacking gone terribly wrong. Now you'll see here, there's basically 4 pages of art paper at this size. It's fairly lightweight paper. I kind of used the margin over here to wash off brushes and whatnot. You'll notice that there will be a few panels through here that were redrawn and pasted down on tracing paper. And in fact, that's what the first panel is right here. And there's a few other tracing paper pieces in behind there. So this is one of the stories that you basically can't read sequentially on the original artwork, and the reason for that is when I'm making comic zines, I try to have the best possible just image quality, and that usually means putting the original artwork right on the photocopier if possible, which is why this is designed this way. So to read the actual story, what you would do is make copies of all the pages, double-sided, trim off the extra bits, cut here, stack, fold, staple, and that's the comic itself is actually only this big. It's a crazy landscape format. Fortunately, for anyone who buys pieces like this, where you basically can't read the artwork sequentially, I'm going to throw in a copy of my book, Young, Dumb, and Full of Comics, which collects most of my early comics, including that one. And you can just read it in sequence in here. And then, there's nothing stopping you from making your own mini comic version if you want out of the original art. All I ask is that you don't make a bunch of copies. Just go ahead and make one for yourself, or if you want, I'll make one for you. Doesn't matter. What else? I guess that's it for that story, actually. As I said, that's an adaptation of a Rheostatics song. I did a few mini comics like that where I was adapting song lyrics that I particularly liked. And I actually got a chance to, I sent a copy to the band, and one of their guitarists, Dave Bedini, very kindly sent me a postcard back saying that they thought it was very cool, and that was very nice of them. I've seen them live at least half a dozen times, and went up and introduced myself to Dave at a show and said, "Hey, I'm the guy that made the comic of Stolen Car." And we've actually wound up running into each other a few times since then. Nice guy, brilliant writer, and a great band. So next up we have this is a two-page set of comics called Family Values. Very influenced by the kind of thing that Harvey Kurtzman might have done at one time. It's each of the pages is showing a sequence of images on a kind of old analog TV screen, with the narration from the TV over top, KyleBakerStyle. And each of them, these were done in 1994, each of them is basically depicting a kind of creepy take on where America was with these topics at the time. This one is about eugenics, and this one is about capital punishment. So, both still fairly relevant. I think these are pretty strong pieces art-wise. I've always liked them. I am pleased that they hold up, in my opinion. Next up, we have a 3-page story. This is the intro. It's an untitled introduction, really, to Dregs number 5, which was the unauthorized autobiography issue, where all of the stories were autobiographical in nature. So this is me being a funny boy here. Basically, whenever I drew myself in the past, up until this point, I was just kind of walking around in a t-shirt, as I tend to do. So in this comic, here I am dressing up in a collared shirt with a tie and just kind of being a little more formal. This is also the issue where it went from being a mini comic to like a magazine-sized comic. So there's some jokes about, how I'm kind of trying to level up and make things a little more professional and so on and so forth, only to be confronted with my old t-shirt wearing self, who then berates me for the following page. I won't bother unsealing this to show you that, because it's basically just a whole bunch more of this. And then after he does that for a page, we run into a third character, my feminine side, who then berates both of them for the remainder of the story. And I am humiliated by my alters, who go off together to plan further torments, I suppose. So it's basically just a silly story, but I think it's executed pretty well. I hadn't realized quite yet when I made this that I was queer or bisexual or any of that stuff. It was, within this year, basically, that the penny started to drop. And it's funny to see these different aspects of my personality that I'm so used to now. Next up, we have In the Right Hands, which was, okay, so if you watch the video for Group B, there is, I suppose I could just drop the clip in here, there is a page called Bad Science, which is, it's a little satirical pin-up of EC Comics style science fiction horror kind of stuff. And what I was going to do in that issue that it was made for was I was going to have some stories like this that were inspired by EC Comics science fiction and horror stories. So this is a 4-page story. I think I was trying to keep the format. I think I noticed how there's kind of an extra gap here, top and bottom. And I think that was me trying to match the aspect ratio of EC Comics, if you ever saw them reprinted. A lot of comics from up until the 60s, I think. I think it's just how they some decision was made basically format wise in there, and the standard comic book size went from being wider in it was wider in the Golden Age and Silver Age, and then probably just to save some money, it got trimmed down to the in America it got trimmed down to the size that we see all the time now, which is the the size that this aspect ratio is made for, as opposed to the kind of truncated one for the EC Comics thing. Anyway, the last page here for Group C is a 3-page story called Aural Fixation, AURAL. It's about listening to music, and it's basically it's dedicated to Bill Griffith, I notice, who was one of my favorites at the time. He's the creator of Zippy the Pinhead, and he's done some pretty good graphic novels in the last 20 years or so. He's kind of famously a crank and a skeptic of modern tech, especially in media, and that's definitely the vibe of this one. It's me speculating on, is everyone going around wearing headphones, listening to the music, and kind of blocking everyone else out? Is that good, or is it bad, or is it maybe both in different ways? So that's kind of what that story is about. Reasonably well drawn, I would say. Yeah, all done on Bristol, and yeah, that's about it for Group C. There's a nice close up on a silly moment. All right, so I'm going to take a break and make sure that recorded okay, and then I'm going to come back and do Group D, which is actually only a few things. But each of them has a bit more of a story to it, so it'll probably wind up taking about the same amount of time. All right, so thanks, and talk at you again real soon.